October 6th. So she is a published author. So it's really awesome to have her come in and talk to us. Okay.
Hi. So I wrote a book.
It's about
Yeah, it's called Maple, and it is about maple, shockingly. You would have never guessed that. Oh, good. Okay, perfect. And it's a cookbook. Yeah, do you know what it's about, Brady? Can you guess what this book is about?
Maple.
Yeah.
That was so hard to read.
Yeah. It's 100 sweet and savory recipes featuring pure maple syrup. And it took me a long time to write it. It took me about a year to write it. Look at how fat it is.
Wow.
There's 100 recipes, and each recipe I had to come up with the idea for it, type it up, and then I had to go into the kitchen and cook it.
See if it tastes good.
To see if it tasted good, and then sometimes it didn't work, and then I had to test it again and again, and then I would send it to someone else, and then they would test it to see if they could get it to work, and then they'd send it back to me, and sometimes I'd have to test it again and then send it back out. So each recipe, all 100 of those recipes had to have that happen. And then I had to tell people why on earth they would want to actually cook the recipes. So I did a few things to make it so that people would feel interested. And one of the things that I did was I wrote what's called the front matter of the book, which is like all the pages before you get to the recipes. I had to give people little things that would make them interested in going farther into it. So I did some photographs, and I tried to make it look pretty so that people would say, hey, maybe I actually want to get in there and find out what these recipes are all about. So I did some storytelling, and I told the story of why I wanted to write a book about maple, and why somebody would want to cook with maple, and little facts like about the history of maple, how to make maple syrup. Have any of you guys ever done backyard sugaring?
My cousin does.
Yeah, you've done it, right? No? You don't do it at your house?
I do it.
Yes, oh yes, you go over to your house, yeah.
I do it.
It's fun, right? I have to say, I never wanted to do backyard sugaring. And my husband was like, Lila's dad was like, I gotta try it. It's so fun. You can boil hot dogs in the sap. And I was like, but it was fun, and we loved that everybody came over and hung out with us while we did it, and I got to cook for everyone. So I filled up these pages with lots of writing. You know, I'm a chef, and I take photos. That's what I do. So I don't really consider myself a writer, but I actually had to do a ton of writing for this.
That's
So,
me.
do you recognize anybody?
That's Lila.
Yeah.
That looks nothing like Lila.
Well, you know, because
Yeah,
it
shorter
takes
hair.
so long for these
Yeah.
books to get made, this picture's almost like a year and a half old.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I was like 8 and a half. Yeah, your
Yeah.
hair is like this short.
So, you know what I did? So what I did was, when you have such a big project like this, I actually just said, all right, I'm going to make a list of everything that I have to do, and I'm just going to go section by section and work on it so I don't get overwhelmed. So I started with the recipes, because that's the best part, right? So I wrote the recipes, and then I started testing them, and I didn't want to do like all breakfast all at once, because that would be too much breakfast, and we'd be eating breakfast 3 meals a day. So I did breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, you know, desserts, mix them all together, and I did that. And I took the photos as I went, and then I went back, and that's when I started working on what I was telling you about, the front matter and the back matter. Because that's after I had worked on the recipes, I had gotten more and more familiar with the subject, and I felt like I was able to fill up the front and back matter from experience that I had learned. So see this photo here?
Yeah.
This is a hard picture to take.
Yeah.
Because basically, when you're taking a photo like that, the maple comes down the side of the stack of pancake, and it's like, it drips really fast. I mean, it's slow compared to other stuff, but when you're trying to get a picture of it, it's pretty tricky. And before I worked on this book, my job, I was called a food stylist, and that's somebody who just does the food part, not the photography part. So I would move the food around, and the photographer would take the picture. So when it came to writing my the introduction to the book, I had written pretty much the entire book at this point, and I wrote an introduction, and I was like, no, that's not good. And I wrote another one, and no, I didn't like that. And then I was stuck, and I don't know if this has ever happened to you guys. Has anybody like been told that they need to write something and then they get stuck?
Yeah.
Can't come up with an idea?
Yes.
There's actually a word for that. It's called writer's block. And I had writer's block, and I was like, I gotta write an introduction, and the more I get upset about it, the harder it got. So I wrote to my friend, and I said, this is what I want to do. I want to write the introduction to my book, and I want it to, speak to everybody who picks up the book. So she said, this is what she said to me. Think about the texture of maple, its viscosity. That's like how thick it is. The way the bottle or the jar catches the light as sun streams through the window. Think about how it feels on your tongue, how its sweetness is deep, not shallow. Think about maple as one of the original slow foods. The weight as you tip the bottle upside down. I would jot thoughts down like these that bring you back to why this topic excited you initially. What is it about maple that made you want to dedicate a whole book to it? So that's called a prompt. So that's when you are stuck and you have writer's block and you ask for help and somebody helps you. And so as soon as I read that, I wrote this introduction. And I'm going to read it to you guys. I'm just going to read you a little bit of it. So I just want to bring you back to this photo real quick. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so I wish I could have this open and read that other page at the same time. The composition is finally there. The fluffy pancakes are perfectly stacked. The lighting is just so. Are you ready? I asked the photographer. I get the go-ahead, hold my breath, and tilt the bottle. Golden liquid emerges, taking its time to ooze from the spout, and then the dripping begins. Soon it cascades from the top layer over the edges of the pancake to the lower layers, hesitating for a moment before making its way to the plate. The photographer clicks furiously, trying to capture the perfect trickle of glistening maple syrup. The light catches amber drops on the sides of the stack. We got the shot. The image is instantly distilled into 2 dimensions. As a former food stylist, someone who cooks and arranges food for photographs, I know all too well how important this moment is. It's more than just a pretty picture. That flow and puddle of maple syrup means something different to every person. For me, the image evokes a snowy morning at my grandmother's house, sausage frying in the skillet, and an enamel saucepan of syrup warming on the back burner. It reminds me of the evenings when the smell of steam rises on the quiet stillness of the springtime air. It calls up the memory of the first time we took our daughter to the sugar house, the delight on her toddler face as she sipped the hot syrup from a tiny paper cup. It's the taste of Saturday mornings at our lake cottage. We're all in slippers and robes. My brother-in-law flipping blueberry pancakes and feeding everyone their second before he eats his first. It's staying ahead of the drips of a melting ice cream cone on a hot summer day. I'm not going to read the rest, but I actually wanted to know if you guys had any thoughts about what that brings up. Go ahead.
That sounds like how I would.
It does?
Yes, it does.
Go ahead, Sony.
It's mostly metaphor.
Yes, it is. Go ahead.
It sounds delicious.
Go ahead.
That reminds me of if well, that reminds me when we went to Congress. I have no idea why, and then went inside and we ate those giant sundaes. It was like the make your own sundaes, and kind of like, where are the dead? You got like 16 M&Ms.
Go ahead, Tessa.
It kind of makes like you like taste it in your mouth.
Mm-hmm. Has anybody ever gotten the maple candies at the farmer's market?
Oh yeah. I've bought candies before.
Yeah. So what I hope to do in this introduction is to get people thinking about maple syrup and what it means to them and about all those things that they love about maple syrup. And that I hoped that in doing that, I would want to make them read more. So then, there's not only just the introduction to the book, then there's the introductions to each chapter. So there's a breakfast chapter, there's a soup chapter, there's a dinner chapter. So I wanted to read you one of the introductions. It's my favorite introduction. It's to the breakfast chapter. I thought you guys would like this one. So this is a picture of our driveway, you guys. Isn't that pretty? All right, so breakfast. My husband's grandpa Vernon, who lived and worked his whole life on the family dairy farm, started each morning by drinking a little dish of maple syrup. I always wondered why on earth he would do that. Wouldn't he want some pancakes to go with it? Or a warm bowl of oatmeal? Vernon was a notoriously no-frills kind of guy, and I fear this trait may be hereditary. My daughters would be just as happy as their great-grandfather to start the day this way. I'm not about to let them, but I have compromised just a little. Webster family house rules. The only time you can lick your plate clean is to get the maple syrup off of it.
That was a good one.
And then, so that makes you want to maybe look inside and see what's inside that chapter, right? So then, there's another type of introduction in a cookbook, and that's called a head note. So when you look at a recipe, you see here's the title here, and here's the list of the ingredients. No, sorry, the list of ingredients, and here's the method. But right up here, underneath the title, is what's called the head notes. And that's where it describes what you're about to see. And it's sort of supposed to be like a little teaser. So you've got your photograph that's supposed to say, ooh, that looks really good. And then this is the description that gets into more detail than the title. So I have a few favorite head notes that I wanted to share with you as well. So this one's a really good one. Oh wait, I'll do this one first. So there's the photograph. So this is the maple ginger chicken thighs. You know how some cookbooks automatically fall open to a particular page because you've used that recipe so many times? Mark my words, this will be that page. Here is a sweet, savory, and easy as heck recipe that is perfect for a chilly evening spent with friends. Am I allowed to say heck?
Oh yeah.
We went over that a lot last night.
Yeah.
Okay, this is also another favorite one. This is for a salad. Spinach salad with blue cheese and candied bacon. This is the head notes. If it is possible for a salad to change your life, then this is that salad.
I'm like, ooh, I want to try that.
Yeah, right? And I have one more to share with you. Maple sour cherry Shirley Temples. My daughters light up with delight when I tell them that yes, they can have a Shirley Temple when we go out. This maple sweetened from scratch version is so much better than the traditional overly sugared kind. And guess what I brought with me?
I know!
Shirley Temple!
How do you come up
up with the recipes?
That's, I love it when people ask me that question. So I come up with the ideas for the recipes by going out to eat a lot, and by reading a lot, and by tasting things and trying new things. And I get inspired by ingredients and by the food that's in season. And so when I came up with what's called the table of contents, that was actually, I had to write the table of contents before I even got somebody to agree to the book.
Oh, raise your hand if we've been doing that. We've been writing our table of contents before we even started writing our book.
Yeah, and it's really good because then you have a roadmap of what you have to do. So I had my table of contents, and when I was working on that, I thought about how I wanted to break it out into sections and which chapters I wanted to have, and then I wanted to make sure that I had a good range of different recipes in each section, and that I wanted to have a range of seasons in each section. So that's how I came up with the idea. So, you know, when I got to the breakfast chapter, I knew that I wanted to have some recipes that were not sweet, that were salty or savory. And I was thinking, okay, well, what could you do with breakfast? So, you know, I just sort of came up with ideas that way. And then to develop the recipe, I write down the recipe first, I print it out, and then I go and I test it. And then I go and I edit it, print it out again, and then I go and I test it again.
And then I eat it.
Mm-hmm. I saw, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, in the aqua top.
Me?
Yes, I saw you.
How do you like make, I forgot.
It's okay. Is it Sam? Is that your name? Sam?
Sarah.
Sarah. Sarah, your mom's Sam.
How did you like, why did you write the book about me?
Why did I choose maple as a topic?
Yeah.
I chose maple as a topic because we make our own maple syrup, and we had a lot of maple around, and I enjoyed cooking. When we were backyard sugaring, friends would come over, and I was like, well, when we have friends over, I should make a whole meal of maple to serve them. And then we started making more and more syrup every year, and it sort of became our sweetener, our go-to sweetener. Like, I started baking with it and
I use
using
it
it year-round. And then I realized that it was more than just a menu, it could be a whole book.
So third graders, just keep your hands down while she's talking, and then you can put them back up for questions.
Go ahead.
Who gave you the note for your introduction?
Oh, that was my friend Cheryl. And she is a cookbook author as well. And because writing's really hard for me, I find that I really like to have other friends around me and people who I can learn from. And I actually took a little workshop from Cheryl. She taught a little food writing workshop, and I took it from her. And at the end of the workshop, she said, if you ever need a prompt, let me know. So I did. Go ahead, Ben.
How did you like come up with the ingredients and stuff for the recipes? Like did you like get it from other things or like mix them or something?
No. So he was wondering how I knew what ingredients to use. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So part of that just comes from experience, from being a chef.
Yeah.
So like for
How did you come
example,
up with the recipes?
what's that?
How did you come up with the recipes to like make it?
So I think this might answer your question. So I already wrote my table of contents, and I had written down carrot ginger soup with maple yogurt. Actually, I had written carrot ginger soup is actually what it originally was when I first wrote it. And then I started writing the recipe, and so what I did was I basically sat down at my desk and I said, okay, I'm gonna make a soup, how would I do that? So write down the title, write down maybe I would write the head note, maybe not, but then I'd say, okay, I think it's gonna be this many cups, it's gonna take this long. And then I would say, okay, so when you make a soup, you have your pot there, you put oil in it. So I wrote down 2 tablespoons extra virgin olive oil. Then I wrote, okay, and then I'm gonna wanna put onions in there, because you always start soup with onions. So, oh no, I put in, let's see what I put in here. Apples, onions, carrots, celery, ginger, thyme, salt. So I put all that into the pot and cooked it. And then you add the broth. And so basically in my head I was like, okay, if I'm making this soup, how would I do it and in what order? And I knew that these were the ingredients I wanted to use because I had an idea in my head of what I wanted it to be like. Does that answer that question for you guys? Okay. Estelle, go ahead.
Is there chili in that book?
Yes. Have you guys been making that chili? The smoky and sweet one? Or the other one with the pinto beans and peppers?
The one that you had.
I made one, I don't know if you know which one. Yes, there is a chili recipe in here. It's called Smoky and Sweet Turkey Chili.
And it's really good.
It's really good. And I know I've served it to you before, Estelle. I don't know if it's the one that your parents make, because I do have one on my blog that's really popular. So this is the Smoky and Sweet Turkey Chili.
It's the one that you served last year.
Yes. Go ahead.
Could you maybe mention some of these recipes to Chef James?
Great idea. Have them scaled up.
The whole cook.
Go ahead, Sydney.
You can buy them a copy of the cookbook.
Why did you want to become a chef?
A chef. Because I love to cook. When I cooked when I was your age. I actually wrote my first recipe when I was your age. But we would get home from school and we had this awesome babysitter, Lizzie, and we would make our own soft pretzels.
She has the recipe.
And I wrote the recipe on an index card, and it's hilarious. You guys would just like crack up. The way I spelled was so bad. I'm not much better at spelling these days. I try, but and it's great. And it, I'm sure, tasted terrible, but I knew back then that I really wanted to be a good cook. So eventually I got further and further along and realized that that's what I wanted to do for my job. You've been waiting for a long time.
What's your favorite recipe?
That's a great question. I can't possibly choose because they're my children. I mean, besides Lila. No, I really love, I've made that turkey chili, the smoky and sweet turkey chili, more times than any of the other recipes probably. And I really love the maple ginger chicken thighs, that one that I read you the head note about, how the book would fall open. And then there's a bread pudding, maple date bread pudding that's really delicious too. It's very sweet and really mapley. Go ahead, sure. Yeah, you.
Where do you usually get your ingredients?
Where do I get my ingredients? So we belong to a CSA. Do any of your parents belong to a CSA?
What's a CSA?
Yeah, I know you do. Yeah, so a CSA, you guys, yeah, so a CSA, a lot of you haven't heard of it, but what it is it's community supported agriculture. So at the beginning of the season, we give money to a farm and we become members of that farm, and then every week on like Thursday or whatever, we go to the farm and we get bags of groceries or bags of vegetables.
Oh,
yeah, and you get it all and then you take it home, and that's what you have to cook with. So I base the way we cook on that, and then I also just go to the grocery store and
Just curious if there were any mentor texts that you used to help inspire you for how you wanted your cookbook to go?
Not really. I mean, sort of. So I had a very clear vision in my head of what I wanted this book to be like, and when I wrote the proposal, I said, I want the colors to be this, I want the photographs to look like this, and I don't want it to be, you know, about the history of maple syrup. I want it to be a really modern, beautiful book. And my publisher read my proposal and they chose me, and I had never heard of them, and they sent me some of their books that they had made, and their books were, it was like they were exactly like what I had described that I wanted my books to be like. They had hand-drawn elements, they had color schemes that were similar to mine, they didn't have jackets. And so from the beginning, the art team at my publisher and I worked together to make it all look the way I envisioned it from the beginning. But in terms of the way it hangs, I've actually worked on more than a dozen cookbooks over the year professionally. I just never had my name on the cover. Have you guys ever heard of Eating Well magazine?
Yes.
Yeah. So I've worked for Eating Well for a long time, and we've done a lot of cookbooks for Eating Well. And I definitely have used that experience to help guide me through this process. I only have time for maybe 2 more. Go ahead. Did I have any helpers? I had so many helpers. So many helpers. I had a woman named Ellen who came in the first month, and she cooked with me every day, and I would be photographing and she'd be cooking, or vice versa. I had a food stylist come help me for a few days. I had my friend Christy who took the family photographs.
Like of me.
She helped me. I had my editor who read every single word 100 times. I had an art team who did all the layout. I had my friend Molly Stevens, who's a cookbook author, write me the foreword of the book, and she gave me so much good advice. I had an agent who was the person who took my entire proposal and helped me write it and make it beautiful, and then she sent it out to all the publishers. And then there were all the sugar makers. I talked to so many sugar makers, maple syrup producers, and they answered a million questions. There's a guy who works at a college in New York, and his job is to study maple sugar science. Like, that's what he does for a living. And that guy and I talked for hours and hours and had so many emails back and forth. I would talk to the people at the Richmond Farmers Market about stuff. I mean, I talked to so many people, I could not have done it alone. It was, I mean, look at how big and fat this thing is. And, you know, it wasn't just me. There were a lot of people who helped. And then there was Lila and Penny, who were my best taste testers, and my husband, who was the best dishwasher.
Yeah, he got really mad at you.
One more. Go ahead.
Can I take your book home?
You can't take my book home, but my book is for sale, and we might be able to get a copy here in the library too, and maybe at the Richmond Library. So,
Awesome, I will take that out.
so I have a website. You guys can go to my website. I'll make sure that you get that. If you want to tell your parents about this, you can go to my website, which is katiewebster.com. And there's links on there to how you can buy it.
All right. Thank you, Katie.